Welcome to the UIBuzz podcast. I am your host, Peter Whittam. On this podcast, I'll be talking about user interaction, user experience, design, illustrations, images, tools, techniques, you name it. If it's anything to do with design, I'm probably going to be talking about it. In this episode, I'm going to share some thoughts on designs and how, specifically whether you design ahead of time of creating something, or do you sort of do it in flow? So let me give you a couple of examples of what I'm talking about before we get into it. Designing ahead of time would be using an app to prototype or even a piece of paper, sketch, whatever, but basically making a design before you start coding up an application or a game or whatever it may be. The alternative of doing it in flow would be that you actually create the design as you're making the application, which, there's no right or wrong way. I'm going to go through my process and some thoughts on that, but I really welcome your thoughts as to how you go about it as well. So up front, I'm going to be honest and say I do it both ways, but I like to design at least a very high level sort of thought process and layout before I start building an application. Now, when I come to build an application or a game, something like that, obviously ahead of time, I have an idea of what this is supposed to solve, right? An application is really supposed to solve a problem, and a game is going to have a particular game style or something like that. So I take that into account and I sit down. Invariably, it'll be with either a piece of paper and a pen, because I just find that, flowing on paper with a pen is still infinitely quicker than all the tools that I've used over time. And in the future episode, like I've said before, I'm going to get into some of the prototype tools. Now, once I've got some ideas on paper, what I'll do is then open up some software. I use the Sketch app on a Mac, but you could really use just about anything you wanted. Now, what I'll do then is I'll start sketching out some prototype screens of, really the first thing I do is I say, okay, this is the content I want to have on the screen. And so I'll just throw up all of those little parts, right? Buttons, text fields, whatever they may be. I'm just going to throw them on the screen. And then I'll look at it and go, okay, what do I need for what screen, right? And then I'll start to lay them out and identify the components that this is going to be on every screen, like if it's a tab bar, something like that. And then I'll break out separate screens for each of the items. If it's a game, what I'll do is I'll look at it and go, okay, same process. What do I need on the screen? Well, I'm going to need if it's the actual game screen itself, I'm going to need a high score, something like that. Any kind of prompts for, maybe power-ups or indicators, something to do with that specific game itself. On a menu screen, I'm going to have play game. There's going to be an about button, all those kind of things, right? Now, there are some things that you just universally do across applications, and those I put in place as well. Once that's done, I'll sit with it for a while. Now, what I mean by that is, I never go dive head first in and go, right, this is my first design, great, I'm going to go with it. I used to do that in the past in my younger years, and it never worked out right, because invariably, an hour into coding something up, I'm going to change my mind. So what I'll do is, I'll actually revisit it over a few days and say, okay, this is not really working now. I don't know why I did this, and change it. So it gives me the way to sort of manipulate it over time to something that feels more right for whatever it is that I'm designing. At that point, once I've got it laid out like that, I'll start to look at, specific colors, fonts, those kind of things. And then depending if it's an application or a website, or just a design, right? If it's just a design, I'll then take it through to the end, design and export it to whatever assets I need. If it's a web page, I'll do the same thing. I'll look at it and say, okay, how can I break this down? Should this be a graphic? Is this really something that's better represented in like HTML, CSS, whatever it may be, a component? things like that. If it's an application, I will invariably export that screen as an image, and I'll use it as kind of a bit of a template, either in the software to build the application, like in the case of, say, Unity or something like that, or if it's Xcode and I'm making a mobile application for the Apple platforms, I'll use it as a template there, and then I'll start using controls within the programming language of choice itself to build those components out and lay them out so that they match in the same position and things like that. There's lots of wonderful tools that help you do things like that now. There's an app called Flawless that is great for taking an image and overlaying it on the iOS simulator, for example. And then I can check that my design matches either pixel perfect or as close as I'm happy with for the layout that I've designed with the actual controls. And at that point, I'll build the application. Now, the other way is, like I say, that I just do it on the flow. And if it's an application that I know is going to be very specifically purposed, maybe it's even an application I'm only building for my own use. For example, I have a Mac application that I use to write my markdown files specific to my websites. So it has a bunch of things that I fill in on the screen. I can save the file and it formats it out into a markdown file for my Gatsby blog, and I just upload it and away it goes. So since it's only going to be used for me, I'm happy to do that in Flow. And so I'll actually just build the application and add the items on the screen as I need them and as I think of them. Now, of course, there's still going to be going through different, iterations on that process. But ultimately, since it's just for me, it only really has to make sense to me, right? It's not something I expect other people to look at and go, oh, I get it, and start using it. So that's kind of a couple of the different ways that I approach the design process, both ahead of time and during development itself. So let me know what you do. I'm curious, which is, the more popular. I suspect with teams and things like that and organizations, of course, designs ahead of time are the way to go because they have to get approved by whoever sells, product, marketing, things like that. It all has to get approved. Maybe it also has to be checked for things like accessibility and that kind of stuff. But let me know. You can reach out to me at UIBuzz on Twitter. You can also go to uibuzz.com and reach out to me there as well. I'm just curious to see what you do for your process. This is something I'm sure we're going to talk about more in the future, and then probably talk about some of the libraries and design systems and what they are and what a design system is and how it works as well in future episodes. Take care of yourself, and I will speak to you soon.